Hello, and at long last, welcome to another model making project. It has taken me a long time and I have saved a lot of pocket money, but I've finally got a beautiful model to paint. I am so ready for this. I'm a little bit nervous because it's been a little while since I've done anything like this, but let's just say I'm hoping that I haven't lost it. So by this point, it is pretty obvious that I'm painting a model of Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood specifically. I very recently played the Ezio Collection. You know, I worked my way through that maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, sort of finishing it, and I loved it. You know, these games, I think, when I first played them when I was a teenager, you know, these games were hugely transformative for me. You know, they really did inform my tastes as I grew older, and, you know, much like, other people, I've become a little bit disinterested in Assassin's Creed as it has sort of like evolved. I think they've lost sight of what it was that made those games special, but that doesn't mean that they weren't special once upon a time, so you can still find that treasure in there if you go back far enough to the ones that you loved, and that's what I did with this. And ultimately, going back and playing the Ezio Collection inspired me to paint a model of him. Like I say, this is a version of him from Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I love the look of Ezio in this game. I think it's probably one of the most iconic character designs in video games. It's so standout, stylish, you know, it looks really, really cool. And thus, like I say, I wanted to paint a model of him. There are a couple of things. First things first, I was halfway through spraying the primer down and realised that I ran out. So I've kind of half done the base piece in the black primer. So I'm potentially going to have to order another bottle of that, which is a shame because I wanted to get going on this today. But, you know, them's the ropes. But the main thing I think I wanted to quickly discuss was the fact that I'm not going to be painting Ezio in the white and red robes that he stereotypically has. One thing that you can do within the games is you can dye your robes. And, you can change the colour of Ezio's clothes and blah, blah, blah. It's something that I think when I played it when I was younger, I don't think Ezio had the same colour robes for more than 20 minutes. I was just constantly going back to dye shops and just trying another dye and another dye and another dye. And so when I came back to it this time, I was kind of curious as to whether or not that would bother me. Turns out that I, still didn't want to play the game in the white and red robes. But I actually landed on a colour palette that I actually really enjoyed, and it was the Roman Gilded Onyx. It's in some lights it looks like a very, very, very deep green base with sort of a royal blue or sort of like a deep navy blue accent with golden trim the whole way around, and then obviously silver work on his braces, blades, and any buckles and stuff that he's got on him. But the dark green can also be seen as black as well, so I think for the time being I'm going to treat it as black, and then depending on how it looks when I finish it, I might sort of lift with a little bit of green over the top depending on how I feel. But I just really enjoyed that colour palette, and as I'm adding this to my collection, having played the Ezio Collection most recently, I did kind of favour the deeper blues, the deeper sort of darker blacks and greens and blues and stuff like that in the colour palettes, in the dyes that I actually played the game in. So it was really fun to sort of like look at this model and be like, well, I kind of want to make him my version of Ezio. I want him to be the colour that I want him to be. And so, the robes are going to be a much different colour palette to those of a stereotypical Ezio statue. But I think that's one of the things that makes this fun, is that you can personalise things and you can change them so that they feel more special and specific to you. So like I say, at this point, I've got a little bit of work to do in terms of tidying up the edges and sort of getting rid of some of those little resin pegs that you get when you do these kinds of 3D prints. But I'm ready to do this. I'm so excited for this, and whilst it's a shame I'm going to have to wait for some black primer to arrive, it will be worth the wait because I really want to get this done. So, it's been a couple of weeks actually since I've sat in front of a camera. I've spent that time, adding base colours to the model, which obviously, for any of you who have watched any of my previous videos, that is quite honestly the bulk of the work that needs to be done on these things. Just applying base colours so that they look thick and full and complete. So then any detailing and stuff that goes over the top of them just sort of lays and looks right. It's been a decent, the model is doing really, really well. Like, the paints are going on beautifully, the colours are really smooth and consistent, it's picking up the texture of stuff underneath. It's looking really cool. I had a little bit of a sort of back and forth with myself on whether or not I'd made the right choice regarding the colour palette. Does it really look like Ezio and all of this kind of stuff? Have I done the right thing in deciding to use the Roman Gilded Onyx colour palette? And I think as I began to construct it, and obviously each time I paint a piece I kind of like assemble it to sort of see what it looks like in situ before I then move on. And I have been really, really pleased actually with how it's looking, and I think it's going to look really quite stand out in my collection. Never mind within sort of like Ezio models, if you like. It's going to be a very different model. But I've still got a long way to go on the base colour thing. I've still got quite a bit of work to do. I'm very nearly finished actually with Ezio himself. Literally painting the last of his boots. I've got a little bit of detailing and another few coats to do with the white on the inside of his cape. And then I've got the head and the hands to do, and that's basically it. So, Ezio himself is coming together quite nicely. I do have the eagle to paint, which is going to be interesting. It's got some very, very fine details on the face, the eyes specifically. The details are so intricate there. So I'm hoping that I can do a decent job of that. But yeah, I'm accelerating through this at a reasonable pace, which I'm quite happy with, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think I'm also thinking about the larger project and what I want him to look like when he's finished. And obviously on some of these pieces there's metalwork, buckles, the big assassin's crest that sits atop his belt, the sword, the hidden blade, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm toying with the idea of doing... Obviously I'm going to make it look like metalwork, do some dark washes first and then dry brush with a silver or a kind of chrome so it has that kind of glitter shimmer to it. I'm also maybe playing with the idea of using a gloss varnish over the top to see what that would look like. Obviously, it would run the risk of kind of really garishly helping those bits stand out, which, whilst not terrible, will it look daft contrasted against sort of matte paintwork? Will that look silly? And At this point, I just truly haven't decided. I'd have to do it on the sword, hidden blades, the buckle work on the torso, and that's basically it. Maybe the odd buckle on his shoe. But otherwise, that would be it. It would literally just be those pieces. So I don't want it to look odd. I don't want it to look strange. But I don't know. I thought it might be kind of fun to do that. Something different, if you know what I mean. But I'm going to continue thinking about that, and I'm going to continue doing base colours. So I guess I'll talk to you in a bit. So I made a lot of progress yesterday. Ezio's basically constructed. Life has been a lot lately, okay? There's been a lot happening. It's been very, very hectic, and, a lot of it's been quite negative and all of that kind of stuff. And I think what happened yesterday was I basically found a pocket of time where I could just work on the model. And that is exactly what I did. I finished the base colouring the day prior, just sort of like a little bit of work on the evening, and then was looking at all the bits that I had left to do and thought, I think I want to just build him. So I did. I dry brushed all the pieces in this sort of like camely beigey kind of colour that I have. I really like that for dry brushing because it just knocks back the deeper tones of the colours, and sort of, rather than everything being textureless, it really just kind of pops everything out and makes it look really nice. And yeah, I blitzed through a little bit more work than I documented, which I'm not super happy about. Like I say, I think I kind of lost myself in it, and then by the time I came to at the end of the session, I was like, oh, I've done way more than I filmed. And so Ezio is now constructed. He is a single piece. There is a couple of bits I need to touch up, mainly the cape, like the inner of the cape, the white piece. Like I say, I use a beige colour to just dry brush and kind of take some of the intensity out of the colours. And I did that on the white, not necessarily thinking about what I was doing. And it doesn't look bad, it's just, it looks a bit stained rather than textured. It sort of looks, it's not what I want. So I'm going to be going over that with a white dry brush just to knock the colour back a little bit and take the intensity out of that yellowy hue that's now on there. But overall, real happy with how he's looking. I actually, because I know last time I was on camera, I talked about using gloss varnish to pick out the metal, but I've just dry brushed it with like a silvery glittered paint, and the metal looks awesome. Like, it looks really, really cool. I'm really thrilled with how it turned out, and it stands out as a texture across the model. Like, I don't really need to highlight it any more than that, which is great. Really, really pleased. So yeah, like I say, I think with the combination of things that have been going on lately, I basically just went to town on painting this, and as a result did a little bit more work than I filmed, so sorry about that. But there's still plenty to do. I've got the sword to finish, which I'm just sort of in the process of doing base colouring and stuff like that on now. I've got the whole eagle to paint, and I have the whole rooftop scene to paint. Again, I've been thinking a little bit about the final model and what I want it to be. And for those of you that have watched my other videos, I kind of like the idea of all of my models being like freeze frames in a scene. The best example, I think, from my stuff is Kane. I did him, so when I was painting the Reaver, I basically painted blood arcing up the sword as though the sword was in motion and the momentum was basically pulling the blood up the blade, so it kind of like spiders out from the tip of the blade. And then I've done sort of like a little bit of smattering on him, some blood in his mouth as though he's been fighting, that kind of thing. And just sort of gave it a little bit of a moment, if you like, something that kind of, oh, this is happening in this scene or whatever. And I initially liked the idea of Ezio being quite a clean model, just flat colour, looking very suave and very clean and clinical almost. But that's rarely the case in the games, like especially if you get into combat and stuff like that, specifically like Assassin's Creed 2. He's coated in blood after a fight and all of that kind of stuff, especially if he's assassinated a target with his hidden blade. And so I kind of want to do that with this. I'd like this to be almost like a freeze frame in an escape from having ended a target. Do you know what I mean? And so my intention is to use the blood paint that I've got to basically cover the hidden blade, kind of pool it in the palm of his hand a little bit, as though obviously he's hit them from underneath and the blade's extended, and then the blood's obviously run down with gravity. So like the bottom of his hand may be kind of mostly covered in blood. A little bit of sort of spattering up the sleeve and the cuff and the metal bracer that he's got. But then I'm also, for any of you that have played the game, whenever he finishes like the assassination of a character or whatever, and as he's walking away from them, he always wraps his cape around his shoulders to sort of cover the weapon arm that's potentially covered in blood. So I kind of like the idea of doing a bloody handprint on the edge of his robe as he's sort of thrown it around himself in a hurry. So lots of detailing still to do. So there's still going to be obviously work to be done on Ezio. The eagle, I'm kind of hoping that that's not going to be too intense. The face is very detailed and very, very intricate, so I know that's going to be a job. But otherwise, I feel like it's going to be a flat colour of some kind, maybe two, sort of like gradiented across the wing. And then dry brushing will do the rest, because these models are printed beautifully. So I have a feeling this will be a bit quicker than I expected. And then I've got the roof piece, which I'm really looking forward to doing that one, because I think it's going to lift the colour of the whole thing. At the minute it's black on black on black, so it's hard for me to visualise what he's going to look like with it. But obviously it's going to be the terracotta tile roof with that sort of sandstone-esque brickwork on the piece of the roof that I've got. So there's still lots to do. Like I say, I've been in a bit of a funk lately. Life has kind of just got on top of me a little bit, and so I've really thrown myself into this in a big way. But there's still lots to do, lots of work to progress with before things are finished. But yeah, yesterday was productive, so here's to hoping today's the same. And so, after a very higgledy-piggledy project, we are here at the end. I kind of feel like this whole project, was a little messy, and I don't know whether that came across in the filming and the obviously presentation of the video, or whether it was just a me thing. But it felt like I didn't have the structure that I had before. So when obviously I've been doing work on Raziel or Kane or Jack, it felt like I had quite a clean structure in place where it was like, okay, this bit first, that bit's done. This bit next, that bit's done. Whereas this kind of felt like a whole mess of like, okay, I'm just going to start doing things and put a camera in front of me and see what happens. So the project as a whole has felt a little bit more chaotic than previous ones. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to reduce the quality of the final thing, but yeah, I never kind of got settled on it. I never really ended up in a position where I thought, okay, this is good, this makes sense. And so, apologies if it kind of came across a bit scattered. Like I say, it may just be a me thing, but yeah, it hasn't felt clean, I think is the biggest thing. In terms of the final model though, I'm really thrilled. Like really, really thrilled with how it turned out. I think initially I had big concerns because of how many pieces there were. I thought that it was going to take me forever to be able to paint it, and whilst obviously, like I've said in the video previously, like there's been a lot going on life-wise and there's been lots of things that have kind of got in the way, I feel like when I was actually working on the project, progress was quite swift. You know, I was able to chew through big parts of the model quite quickly. But yeah, I'm really thrilled with how it turned out. I think the level of detail that I have in this model is probably the highest level of detail in any of my models. I think for definite the quality of the finish is higher than the other ones, purely because the other ones, so like Kane and Raziel specifically, the models were beautiful. Like the actual prints and the resin models themselves had such a level of detail to them that they were magnificent to work with and paint, but their bases were horrendous, like choppy and nasty and bulky and like bits falling off them and stuff. And they really didn't do the model justice, in my opinion. Whereas this has a base that fits the model. You know, the quality of the rooftop scene there in front of you is beautiful. Like the textures are immaculate. The way I've dry brushed the terracotta, you can see the imperfections in the design of the terracotta. Like you're not looking at the imperfection of the design of a print, you're looking at like that's texture for terracotta on the roof. Like it's magnificent, and so I'm super thrilled with how it all turned out. Obviously, I've got a model of Bayek here as well. When I was in the habit of regularly pre-ordering video games and spending a ridiculous amount of money on them, I bought the gold edition, I think it was, of Assassin's Creed Origins, a game that I love, and Bayek is a character that I really love. And when I put them on display downstairs, you can see the mirroring in them, in the sense of obviously they have the opposite hands down and the opposite arms out, so they mirror each other beautifully. And so when they're on display downstairs, this is how they are appearing in front of you, sort of thing. So I'm really, really happy with that. A couple of details I kind of never really got round to talking about whilst I was constructing this. Obviously, I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted it to very much be a version of Ezio that I effectively played and role-played through Assassin's Creed Brotherhood specifically. And, you know, there were certain things that I was adding to that, i.e. the dye. So the actual coloration of Ezio, it reflects the version of Ezio that I played during the course of Brotherhood. But also there was other things. So obviously I talked a little bit about the Hidden Blade and how that sort of final blow, that final assassination thing, sort of as he struck the enemy, the blade sticking forward and how the blood would run down the hand and things like that. And I thought long and hard about other things. Obviously I discussed putting a bloody handprint on the edge of the robe so that it would, you know, as he was sort of like running away or whatever, he'd hide the weapon arm. But I thought a little bit more about that, and I don't know, there was something kind of grotesque about it that it didn't sit super well with me, like the idea of that red blood handprint on the edge of white fabric. It sort of, I don't know, it didn't sit right with me. But then sort of from a gameplay perspective, as soon as you've done a kill and you run, his cape is draped over his shoulder and off he goes, you know. And obviously, like I described before, I wanted this to be a halfway escaped Ezio. You know, he's on the run actively as he's trying to get away from the scene of the crime, sort of thing. So I omitted the hand, and I'm kind of glad I did, because the white on that cape on the inner is super striking against the rest of the model, with everything else being so dark, so I'm kind of pleased I left it like that. But the other thing that I never spoke about is what I was going to do with his weapons. So obviously he's got a sword on his side, and I think it's actually one of the top end ones in the game, like, or at least inspired by one of the top end ones in the game, where they've got all the golden filigree and sort of like metalwork around the handle. I never really used a sword during the course of the game. It kind of just hung at his side and that was it. If I was fighting, I was either using the hidden blades or his hands. So actually like just sort of his fists. Because obviously for those of you that have played the game, there are certain enemies that can only be like beaten with the counterattack with open hands, so you can catch the weapon and then deal with them. And so what I instead decided to do was as though he'd been in a fist fight, or he'd been maybe kind of in a confrontation earlier and he'd used more than just his hidden blade. And so what I've done is I've sort of bloodied the knuckles that typically get damaged during the course of a fight, and it's the front two and this back one. Generally speaking, this knuckle kind of avoids it, so, you know, I kind of wanted to make it so that it looked believable. But I added some pinkish purplish bruising to the whole set of knuckles, so it kind of looked like blood was pumping into that area. And then just ever so slightly broke the skin on these knuckles and added a little bit of blood effect here, so it looks like he's been sort of in the middle of a fight. And then I think on top of that, I've just added the very smallest amount of spatter over the you know, sort of near his collar if he's hit somebody and the blood's kind of jumped out of them, which is a weird way of putting that. But yeah, I wanted to add little details that kind of were reflective of my time with Ezio in Brotherhood. Like I say, overall, I am thrilled with how it looks. Critiques, I think, for me, I didn't like the face. I'm glad that the hood obscures the majority of the face, because there was just no room to get a brush in. There was no room or space to be able to detail the eyes and do anything really sort of significant in that area. So they're there, but they don't look good. And, you know, they kind of, like I say, I'm very glad that the hood, like the peak of the hood, kind of covers the eyes so that you're not really looking at it. And I think the only other thing, there was a very slight breakage during assembly where this arm basically broke in the middle, like the one that he's got down broke in the middle. And so I had to kind of like re-glue it and affix it into place. So there's a slight crack on one side, but otherwise, I'm really pleased. I think I did a good job with this, and you know, after having had such a long time away from engaging with this hobby and having had such a long time away from actually being able to do this, you know, being able to do it again with such a beautiful piece was a thrill, and I can't wait to do more. But I think that is that. You know, the model is finished, the project is complete, and I'm so very thrilled with the results. I think he looks great. And like I say, partnered with Bayek, I think they look great together. They look really, really good together. I'm actually toying with the idea of doing some detailing work on him and sort of like, you know, touching him up, doing some dry brushing and things, just to sort of like match the colour palettes a little bit more. But that's for another time. But yeah, this was great. I really, really enjoyed doing it, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be as long before I'm able to afford another one, because, you know, this matters a lot to me. This is a great source of pleasure for me. And so, you know, I'm really pleased that I was able to do it. Coming up, though, are some smaller projects that are a little bit different. Obviously, this model was pricey, and, you know, it meant that fair enough, I've done a beautiful piece of work, but it took a lot of time to put the money together to be able to afford this. And so what I have decided to do is I'm going to be doing some smaller projects with some bits on the side. So it's going to be kind of like an amalgamated project. Models are much smaller, therefore less expensive, and I've kind of tried to make these things a bit more affordable for me. But more on that in the future. I'm wanting to try and keep on this train. I'm wanting to try and keep going with these projects because it matters and it brings me joy. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully it won't be too long until we're talking again. See you later.